Hey everybody, I'm Russo, and I do a little work here and there. Looks like we're back in the research workshop, and again talking about paper, but this time our discussion is in the realm of articulation. Now this is something that you could search for online, but people don't seem to like to use the word articulation, and if you do a search for paper joints, well, I don't think Safe Search is going to do anything for you. So I suppose the point here is to make joints for papercraft figures, probably mechs and things like that, since having exposed joints makes a little bit more sense on those things. But I do have plans to try some more organic projects in the future. More notes on that later, but as a hint, I will say that Samus may have something to do with it. So I'm sure you've been checking out my two, what are they, T-shaped things? These are cardstock tubes, I guess you'd call them. Most of the pieces are rolled very tightly, but some of them are legit tubes, like this one, and it can quite easily slide over the more standard-sized pieces. So the two T's, when aligned, act as you would expect from one of those double knee joints that you see in a lot of figures, but it also has a bit of rotation and extension there in the middle. The T-shaped piece with a sleeve has an extra little bit around the backside, and that's just so it's easier to show off that particular axis of rotation. So if we make the two T's, what is this, perpendicular, then we will have three axes of rotation. Of course, the X, where we had to make it perpendicular, that extra little bit on the end, which is our Y-axis, and here at the far left, our Z-axis. But I thought of a little extra bit to make this even better because we do have that small amount of extension there in the middle. So this is a little mock-up. I know it's ugly, but you'll have to bear with me. Where you have a little pie piece shaped cavity, and that would be closed off. You would have to install that particular T, whichever one you want, before the assembly of the model is complete. But when it's in there, you see it still rotates around, and you can push it in and extend the joint for what appears to be a straight translation on that Z-axis. So that's neat if you want a shoulder joint where the model can shrug and, you're using paper or something like this, and justifiably don't want to go to the trouble of making paper ball joints, which I'll get to eventually. They wouldn't be great. So yeah, this is cool, but I know what you're thinking. It might be difficult to miniaturize. And, in a way, you're right, but I will not let public opinion discourage me. So, here it is miniaturized, with some extra bits on it because I do expect demonstrating it at this size to be a little more difficult. This is made using standard printer paper and toothpicks, along with super glue and elbow grease, I suppose. But you can see we still have that X, Y, and Z rotation. And you might notice that wedge, it's spun around the wrong direction right now, since I just eyeballed all this, and it doesn't really like fitting the other way. But if this were a full assembly, then it would probably work a lot better. That being said, if I flip this bit around, and you ignore that top hinge, it does look quite a bit like a foot. How cool is that? So yeah, for an ankle like that, you probably don't want that top T-piece to move around at all. But for a shoulder, or a neck, for instance, it works pretty well. Coincidentally, this is how I would do a neck because the, particular order of the axes is kind of important here. So back to our larger model, you may be tempted to mount it this way so that the bottom T is in line with what I guess would be the shoulder blades. But the issue here is that tilting the head left or right looks a little wonky. You have to attach this top portion to the actual head, which means turning left and right looks fine. Looking up and down is okay, even though that usually happens at the base of the skull and not at the base of the neck. But yeah, tilting left and right looks a little funny. So if we spin it around, the base of the neck handles the tilting left and right, looking up and down is the T at the top, and looking left and right is the same as it always was. So yeah, it's a pretty neat little thing, just a couple of T's, and as you can see, it's not too tough to make one that's smaller. Granted, it's not small enough for a, properly scaled, normal-size human-type person, like Samus, I guess. But hey, it would work pretty well for those Federation Force mech suit things. And the larger ones would probably work pretty well if you decided to make 28mm scale mechs and stuff, because those would be pretty big. So yeah, in terms of changing this around, the biggest thing you can do is extend what I suppose we'll call the shaft of the T's, that column there. And if they're further apart, then you can get more extension, but it will also change the nature of the rotation on one or more of the axes. It depends on what you do. But yeah, that is what it is. I needed some easy articulation, and this is pretty much the first thing I came up with. But hey, lucky me, it works. So now I just have to decide what to put it in, and like I said at the beginning, I got some pretty good ideas. So until next time, you've been watching the Research Workshop on Russo Works, and I'm Rousseau. Out.